Closed captioning for Lakeland Currents is supported by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, Telecommunications Access Minnesota, and Nisswa Tax Service. Nisswa Tax Service, tax preparation for businesses and individuals. Across from City Hall in Nisswa and online at nisswatax.com.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lakeland Currents, where tonight we're going to talk about something that interests all of us, food. At least it's interesting to me. And our guest this evening is really an expert on foods. He raises a lot of interesting things. His name is Ryan Pesch. He's with the University of Minnesota, the Extension area. And I also have on here, Ryan, that you are with the Community Economics, which is also part of that Extension job title, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
What does that mean, Community Economics, in terms of your job description?
Well, we call it our program area. So I'm part of the Extension Center for Community Vitality. And I know Jody Hornvet was on here, so she was in the leadership side. There's some of us that deal with sort of leadership, facilitation in communities. And then myself, I deal with kind of community economic development. So I'm typically working with communities who are trying to figure out, how do we build more businesses in our community? How do we make our main streets, our communities more economically viable? I deal a bit with sort of trainings for individual businesses and small businesses. So, for example, I do a lot of internet marketing workshops, and I've done a lot of those in the region lately. But we also do some work, say, on like business retention programs, where we're asking business owners what do they think about the business climate in their community, so that local business, kind of like a local EDA, a local chamber, can kind of take action, put an economic development plan in place so that they can improve the local business climate. And so I think this whole thing on local foods is kind of one part of that. Communities trying to find what are possible avenues to new businesses in their community, growing entrepreneurship, growing new businesses, and so local foods is one such solution.
It's really interesting because it doesn't matter if you are a Walmart, a Target, or if you're a local grower of chickens or a local grower of beef. Yeah. Marketing is the key. I mean, it really is the key. And I was hearing the news today. Best Buy is closing 50 stores and laying off a large number of people. I don't remember how many people, but part of it is that market niche that they used to have has been picked up by Amazon and others on the internet. And it's interesting that you say you're doing a lot of work with small businesses in these rural communities to try to help them understand how important marketing is and to get them on the internet. What did you say, like about 40% of them are currently on the internet and 60 are not?
Yeah. We're my part of Extension is currently involved in this initiative called Minnesota Intelligent Rural Communities Initiative. We're doing this in part with Blandin Foundation, some other partners statewide, and then us with Extension. Our work is around kind of small business use of the internet. And last year we did a research project where we looked at, let me see if I get my numbers right, like 16,000 different businesses and their web presence in greater Minnesota in 19 different communities. And when looking at that, we found that only 42% of them had a website, which I think most people today, with all the use of the internet out there, and even though a lot of people are searching the internet just to find businesses, to do a lot of window shopping online, it's kind of surprising that, if you look at greater Minnesota, only 42% have even a website, and less than 10% of them were using any kind of social media like Facebook or Twitter or things like that. So even though a lot of small businesses know that using the internet is important, they still haven't gotten comfortable enough with using the internet or comfortable enough with those tools that they're willing to pick them up and run with them and use them to their advantage. Because, of course, what we see, you're talking about some of the larger corporate entities and Fortune 500 companies certainly are doing whatever they can, bringing people on staff to use the internet to their advantage. And I always say this is an opportunity where, through our education, we're trying to help those smaller businesses learn how they can take the internet for their own advantage, may reach more customers, reach a broader audience, get some of those customers that are in maybe 1 day a week in 2 days a week, or find new ones. So.
Well, this whole issue of growing local foods is huge, isn't it? I mean, it's changed a lot over the last 10 or 15. What is the status of growing local foods in Minnesota right now?
Well, I mean, it's definitely come a long ways in 10, 15 years. 10, 15 years ago, there were very few farmers markets operating in Minnesota anymore. The ones that were operating were kind of our legacy farmers markets, like the St. Paul Farmers Market, have been around since 1850 something, the Minneapolis Farmers Market, the Duluth Farmers Market, maybe in some of the other larger communities. And now we've gotten to the point where I really think that we're in almost a local food movement, if you will. And I think there's a lot of evidence to point that out. So if you just look at farmers markets, going from just a handful of farmers markets in the state, say 15 years ago, nowadays we're at the point where almost any community with 2,000 people in population, and even a lot less than that, are operating a farmers market. It may not be a very large farmers market. It may just be an informal farmers market with 3-4 vendors. But even communities like that are operating farmers markets. Another piece of the evidence is something that's been at kind of the forefront with local foods that's been quite important are CSA operations. So CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And these are farms that basically sell a share of the season's harvest and deliver it to people throughout the season. People are typically, families will pay some amount of money up front, and then the farm, as produce comes in season, will make a delivery to their house once a week, once every other week, or they pick it up at a drop site.
And is that getting to be pretty common way of marketing?
Yeah, it's getting very, very common. I mean, if you looked at, say, 15 years ago in Minnesota, maybe we had about a dozen CSA operations, and all those CSA operations were centered around the Twin Cities market. So some people up in the St. Croix River Valley, some people on the southern edge of the Twin Cities, in the western edge of the Twin Cities. And now currently, based on my own estimates, some of the numbers that you see from Minnesota Growing, like I'm confident we have over 100 CSA operations now in Minnesota. So I mean, so if you just look at the evidence from the market, there's definitely been a large increase in the number of people that are vendors, that are local growers, but also a number of people that are customers and are looking for local foods. And really, they're kind of they're pretty much the main driver behind this. It isn't. There just seems to be a cultural shift that's taken place over the last 10, 12 years, where people are thinking a little bit differently about their food, and because of that, are looking to seek out alternative sources.
What are they?
Are
they trying to get away from pesticides and that sort of thing? Or are they trying to get into something where they just know more about the person that grows the food? What's driving that cultural change?
Yeah, I think there's some bigger things kind of happening in our media and our culture. So certainly we've had a lot of food scares recently over the last 5-10 years. Spinach.
Pink slime.
Pink slime is one. Is our most recent example, but I mean, I think people remember 3-4 years ago when we had the spinach scare out of California. A couple of years ago, we had the scare around peanut butter and
cantaloupe.
Cantaloupe, yep. The issue about listeria on cantaloupe and stuff. So that's giving some people pause. But I also think that there's just kind of been a cultural shift. I mean, say in the last 5-8 years, we've had just a whole spate of literature and movies that have gotten people thinking a little bit differently about food. So Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan has been a very popular book. Animal Vegetable Miracle has been another very popular book. Super Size Me was very big book, maybe 7-8 years ago, and then it ended up becoming a movie. Food Inc. is another movie. And so...
Is that the one talking about our corn-based economy?
Yeah. And so Food Inc. Follows a bit about what Michael Pollan was talking about with Omnivore's Dilemma, where they're trying to take a broader look at the food chain and say, this is what our food system is currently, and looking at the prominence of particular commodities, and just sort of looking how that's changed over time. People said, well, I don't know, I don't know if that makes sense anymore, and it's given people pause enough to say, well, what is the alternative? Where else could I source food? And it's bringing people to rediscover such things as farmers markets, rediscover CSAs, try to build that relationship with that individual grower. So because it's a values-based movement, people are looking for qualities in their food. I think based from some of these cultural changes that we've seen. But they're also, one part of that quality is how local that food is.
And it isn't just organic, is it? I mean, there are some people who are organic, but there are certainly a lot of the local farmers groups are not organic. They don't pretend to be.
Right, right. And so, I mean, as a customer, people are saying, you know, boy, I can get certified organic. That may come from South Africa. I don't know. It's organic. That's good. However, does that really make sense? I might be able to get fresher food that may not be defined as organic or certified organic locally. But maybe that makes more sense for me and my family. I can decide on what qualities of food and learn more about exactly how that food is produced because I'm sourcing it closer to the source. I'm getting it directly from the grower. And if I am concerned about pesticides, I can ask the grower that right to his face and say, you know, how do you produce this? Mm-hmm. Maybe you aren't certified organic, but I just want to know what production practices you undertake in producing this. And so what we've seen, our customers have become a lot more sophisticated. And in doing so, are seeking, and based on their values and some of that sophistication, are seeking out real particular kinds of foods. And I think with that shift or this period of time, we've seen this real growth in the local foods market because of that. And so growers are just trying to react to what they're seeing in the marketplace, what they're hearing from their customers, from people who are looking for, you know, alternative means of sourcing their food.
No, one of the things that you do, because I know a lot of people have learned to raise things, but they don't want to get into marketing them. Mm-hmm. You know, I was a beekeeper at one time in my life, and the fun part about it for me was producing the honey. The part that wasn't so fun was trying to figure out how to sell 55-gallon barrels of honey.
Right.
But that's something that you do now as part of your extension, is that you show these people different ways to direct market this stuff.
Right, right. And that's often what we find, that a lot of people that get into production, local foods production, are in love with the production of it. I mean, there's so much romance around farming. I often say it's the romance is all wrapped up in the production of farming. You know, the whole thing about, you know, walking pastures and taking the tractor out into newly tilled soil and stuff. And oftentimes people don't get into it because of the marketing, right? Like you're saying, it's the part that people aren't as comfortable with. So yeah, I've done a number of workshops on for growers, both in terms of how they can market their product face to face through some of these different marketing channels like we were talking about, whether it's a farmer's market or a CSA, roadside stand, but also how to market that stuff online as well. Recently, the Northwest Sustainable Development Partnership hosted this thing called Local Foods College, and we did it by ITV. So I got to do the part on farm marketing. And a lot of the other people in Extension, our small farms team in Extension, did some of the work along all these production topics like orcharding 101 and small fruits and raising broilers and chickens. And then I got to do the part on, okay, now that we've learned how to grow this stuff, how can we market? How can we market this? What are some things that you need to know about pricing your product, about identifying your customer, understanding what your customer is looking for, and getting that to your customer in a profitable way. And so being that the local foods movement certainly is growing, what we're doing is we're attracting a lot of newer growers. And so it's great to be attracting newer growers and startup growers, but a lot of folks don't have those skills yet in terms of, you know, how best do I market this product.
How about the safety of local foods? You know, we've heard things about people selling milk, whole milk that hasn't been pasteurized. Maybe there's been eggs sold in places where there could be possible contamination issues. Is Minnesota pretty stringent on those kinds of things? Are they regulating that market fairly well, or is it pretty open?
Well, I mean, that's probably more a better question, I think, for the Minnesota Department of Ag. I mean,
but from your perspective, what does it look like?
You know, from my perspective, I mean, having dealt with a number of local growers, people that have been around it for a while are very sensitive to these issues about safety. And so some of our most professional growers, say if they're vegetable growers, take safety very seriously and pay attention to that. A number of people that are maybe now entering the market maybe don't know as many of the some of the basics around post-harvest handling and how to handle food in a way that it's done safely and that it also produces a quality product. So I think there's a difference that we're seeing in terms of growers that have been around a while and those that are still getting their feet wet and learning as they go. And there's certainly a group of people in that. In some of our work in extension, there's people that work in food safety. I know our friends from St. Paul operate this one on good agricultural practices, which is, as a vegetable grower, how do you handle fruits and vegetables after they're harvested in a way that it's safe, that we aren't getting listeria on melons and some of the other, or E. coli or any of those things, using good potable water. But some of those basic management practices on how do you take care of that produce in a way so that it's safe, but also it's a better quality. So if anybody's ever had picked up produce from their farmer's market and it just never held as well in their refrigerator, maybe as some things that they got from their local grocery, that's often a post-harvest handling issue. And again, we're attracting a number of new growers and getting their feet wet, and they're learning some of these processes as they go along. So certainly people are concerned about safety and are working to meet those food safety regulations.
I know you and I talked about this. We've both seen this YouTube movie that's out recently, filmed, I believe, out in Nevada, where this farm is having a huge celebration. I think it's a wedding.
Right. And
they've brought in chefs, and everything has been raised locally, and they're eating and drinking all this product, and the health department from Nevada comes in with cars and shuts the whole operation down. I mean, it's a legitimate YouTube movie. It's not it's not a make-believe. And there's a lot of people that were upset that whole thing happened, that they basically shut the whole operation down. There were hundreds of people at this event, and it was over safety. And I was just curious, because I haven't really heard of issues in Minnesota, except for around whole milk. I don't think I've ever really heard of safety issues being very common in Minnesota.
Yeah, it really hasn't been a common thing. Because again, I mean, growers, if they're getting people sick, they just aren't going to be in business very long, right?
Right.
And because local food growers are direct marketing, they know their customers quite well, and their customers know them quite well.
Right.
And so people are cognizant of those issues and certainly don't want to get anybody sick.
In this growth period, because I think we're definitely in a growth period of local foods, it seems that if you can get into some of the grocery stores, you've got your foot into a nice piece of marketing. I know there are more and more local stores that are carrying local products.
Right.
And they're seasonal, of course, but is that what do you focus a lot on that, on getting them into local grocery stores, supermarkets, and regions?
Well, actually, it hasn't been a large focus of mine.
It hasn't.
Really still the lion's share of the local foods market are really in these local marketing channels or direct-to-consumer marketing channels. CSA operations, farmers markets, roadside stands, pick-your-own operations. That still is very much the lion's share. But I do think it gets to that point about where the local foods movement has come over this period of time. So, I mean, it's come from, small informal farmers markets where people are only direct marketing to customers to now where, there's all these other marketing channels that are looking for local product, like you're talking about grocery stores, restaurants. I know there's an initiative here around Brainerd I wasn't directly involved in, about aggregating food together from local growers and getting it to some of our resorters around the Brainerd Lakes district. So you're seeing some real sophistication now in the local foods movement in how growers are trying to cooperate, work together in order that they can serve these bigger markets. Because 5-10 years ago, a lot of our local growers really weren't at the place where they could serve a wholesale market well. They were smaller scale operations. They didn't have enough product. And, a lot of local growers will say, why should I sell wholesale if I can sell retail? And so only now have we gotten to the point where there's enough growers, enough massive growers, enough product, and enough demand coming from these new marketing channels in grocery and wholesale and direct restaurants and the like, that we're seeing growers trying to respond in kind. I was just down in Benson the other day, and I usually work in the west central area of Minnesota, more so than central Minnesota. And the thing that we were talking about there is a thing that we call a food hub. So oftentimes a lot of our local foods growers are at a smaller scale, and only by taking product and aggregating it together with other growers is there enough product to service, say like a grocery or an institutional market. So a lot of hospitals are now looking at how can we bring in some food locally, some percentage of other food, either at a nursing home or a hospital. But those are pretty big accounts.
Oh, I bet.
And so for people that are at the level where they're just an individual vendor at a small farmer's market, they don't have enough product to do that. And so it's a matter of scaling up either an individual grower or a set of growers scaling up together to get the product together and
to meet that need.
To meet that need.
Yeah.
So I think that really gets to that point about how much more sophisticated the local foods movement has become. And certainly another part of that is farm to school.
What does that mean?
Well, farm to school is where a school is sourcing some food locally, and oftentimes it's coupled with some education as well.
You're talking about the local school district?
Local school districts. So
getting that product into the local school district.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's an organization called IATP that has done these food service director surveys for the last 5-6 years. I think 2006 or something, there were about 20 school districts in Minnesota that were doing some kind of farm to school.
Wow.
But now, the most recent one from last year is 146 school districts. So it's about 68% of school districts are doing some form of farm to school. And so for some schools, that might just be a special meal that takes place in September, or a special meal that takes place once a month over the season. For other school districts, it means something a lot bigger, where they're integrating a lot of local food into their entire menu.
Interesting.
So, like I said, it's typically, when people are talking farm to school, they're talking about not just bringing in this healthier food to kind of spruce up the school food service, but also to bring in some kind of education. Typically, people are bringing in, maybe if a local grower brings in sweet corn, to also bring that grower into the classroom or the cafeteria to talk about, this is how I raise this. Mm-hmm. This is where it's raised. This is how it's raised. So students learn a bit more about where their food is coming from and how it's produced. I
got to jump to another topic.
Sure.
I only have a few minutes left, but you do so many interesting things. But I know one of the areas that you do some research in is to see in rural communities how many people shop in the rural community, how much of that shopping is done in their town, or how much as it goes to the big box stores. Mm-hmm. And do you find averages, if you look at our communities around Minnesota, that X number of percentage of people do their shopping in their community and X number go to the regional area? Mm-hmm. What are you finding in that research?
Yeah, so the research we've done, we call it retail trade analysis. We're usually doing this measurement called pull factors, where we're using sales tax data. So all merchants are reporting sales tax data. And so we know quite well, based by city and by county, where those sales tax receipts are coming from. And if you look at the state of Minnesota, it's fairly spotty, where you have very strong regional centers that are pulling a lot of sales into those regional centers. Say in Alexandria, a Fargo-Moorhead, a Brainerd-Baxter. And some of our outlying counties and communities lose a fairly large portion of their sales. Of some counties, say in central Minnesota, I've seen people are in that 50 to 60%. They're retaining 50 to 60% of their sales based on their population.
So 50% is going somewhere else to purchase shop.
50% is going somewhere else.
It'll be interesting to see if the price of energy keeps going up, if that is going to cause a switch there, or if people will continue to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really an issue because we are such a mobile society that people don't think twice now about driving 45 minutes to reach, big box store or regional center.
To save $4.
To save $4. Yeah, right.
And spend that extra on the gas.
Right.
Yeah, really.
Right. So, if gas goes up to $5, $6 a gallon, people would really think twice about that 45-minute drive, wouldn't they? They'd think twice about that hour trip, because it's really going to add up.
So do you find, we've had Ben Winchester here talking about the vitality of our communities, and his message was that our small communities are doing better than most people think they are. Is your research suggesting the same thing? I mean, are you finding that to be the case too?
Yeah, I mean, you know, similar to what Ben was talking about, I was just in a community last night where we were looking at a demographic analysis, and we saw those newcomers that Ben was talking about in terms of younger grade school age kids
coming back.
There's an increase from the 2000 census to the 2010 census. We see younger adults. There's an increase in that age cohort too, from 2010 census, from 2000 census to 2010 census. So oftentimes in our rural communities, in our small communities, we can get in this churn where we only think about the negative or the things that we've lost over the years. Whereas if you look at the numbers, if you look at some of the things that are going on positively in our community, I definitely see that there is hope there. There are positive things taking place in our community, both demographically as well as in terms of people getting together and growing businesses in their community, whether it's local food businesses or otherwise.
And I think we're living in an era of probably the greatest change that we've ever seen in our lives. I mean, I think we're going to look back at this period right now. It's just, the rules are all out the door, aren't they? I mean, our society is so mobile. The internet's changing the way we all do business.
Right.
And a lot of the people that can come back to our small communities aren't doing the traditional manufacturing jobs. There are other things that are happening now. It's just a fascinating area. If people want to find out more about what you're doing, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, the best way to get a hold of me is by email, pesch@umn.edu.
PSCH?
PESCH.
And
they want to get to me personally.
Yep.
But to hear more kind of about extension, some of the work we're doing in local foods or otherwise, I would just go to extension.umn.edu, and so or just Google University of Minnesota Extension.
Great. Thanks for being on the program,
Yep.
Ryan. It's a fascinating area you're doing, and it's going to be interesting to see how local foods keep growing.
Great. Thanks.
Fun stuff. You've been watching Lakeland Currents, where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until next time.